police force which is supposed to protect critical infrastructures, such as this. Mr. Speaker, we cannot continue having some small cartels who specialize in sending young boys to go out there and vandalize such infrastructures and then bring those things as scraps to them for them to sell to the international market. Copper, transformers, all these things. So the actual exportation itself of scrap metals should be banned in the country. We need to ban it. We are a country that wants to industrialize. We can recycle that iron ore, or what do you call the metals that are there, and use them ourselves to add value to our industrial sector. So when I hear, and then the penalties have got to be not only for the young boys who go and steal these things to go and take it to a big person at the other end. Usually, handling stolen property should carry more severe penalty than the actual stealing itself. But the people who are actually encouraging this business are people who are businessmen themselves and largely would want to export these things outside the country. They pull it together, they aggregate it, consolidate it, and then sell it to either a Chinese or God knows somebody else who's going to send it out of the country. Mr. Speaker, you cannot fight the symptoms of a disease. You go and attack the vector itself. So what we need to do, and I think any developing country, any country that's worth its own salt, that wants to seriously develop, cannot develop without having an industrial takeoff. And you cannot now have an industrial takeoff if you don't protect your iron, your metals. We have to protect those metals. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, we're already talking of having power outages and sometimes not getting our electricity because of this kind of thuggery and burglary or the stealing of these things. The famous princess, when we had the French Revolution, said, if they don't have, if there's no bread, why not eat cake? For somebody now from other parts of the country other than northern Kenya, the adage befits very well the state we're in. We don't have the national grid in the whole region. The only places we have the national grid is up to Isiolo, a little bit past Isiolo, and on the other hand, we have it only up to Garissa. And beyond Garissa, we don't have the national grid. We don't have electricity. We don't have connections. All these things that you talk about, the last mile connections and all those things, are basically news and music to our children, and our students, and our mothers and fathers, and young mothers and fathers. So it's important also, while we're talking about these things, to understand the need to take this development to the four corners of this country. And the only way to take it to the four corners of this country is to disabuse, Mr. Speaker, is to disabuse this very village concept of trying to reduce this country into villagization of politics. Politicization of every small thing. Mr. Speaker, when I was in the 10th Parliament, we passed what was called the Equalization Fund. The principle and the idea behind the Equalization Fund was that those all the northern frontier districts and the contiguous districts who were a buffer zone for the center, who were left out of development right from the colonial days up to the time when we got independence. And after independence, after we got independence, then we had the Sessional Paper number 10 to continue that institutional marginalization of those areas. And we've had, at the time we were passing our own Constitution 2010, we had all those years, from the time we became a colony and protectorate of Kenya, up to the time we got independence, and up to the time we had 30 years later, over 100 years of systematic government, institutional marginalization of those areas. In the shortest possible time, to begin with, we ended up with a very small amount, 0.5% of the annual revenue. 0.5% for all those 14 counties, 16 counties that had, or 14 counties that were essentially under that. Garissa, Wajir, Mandera, Lamu, all the way up to Isiolo, Marsabit, Turkana. I mean, those were the original things. But then this was expanded now to call it the ASAL areas. Areas that did not suffer the way we suffered ourselves over that period of time. So it was watered down. It was going to have very little effect. And then we went further and said that we're going to look for marginalized pockets in the rest of the country. Kenny, you get my point? Even in the major urban centers, we were looking for that. The idea is very simple. It's a way of trying to make sure that this country does not remain a united Kenya republic with one nation and one people called Kenyans. Nobody is going to accept to become a second-class citizen in his own country or a third-class citizen. These are recipes of a period of time for revolutions. For revolutions. So when I see today people talking about 1 mile, 1 vote, 1 man, 1 woman, 1 vote, absolute nonsense. You can't get any more dimwit than to advocate for such petty, base, literally, and frankly, things that you would never want to be associated with as a nationalist. And then somebody like that would want to become a president in this country. You think you're going to become a president and people are going to allow you to come and run the country and you take them like they're your slaves or part of your colony? No, they will revolt against you and there will be a revolution in the country. There were going to be civil wars. It's a recipe for a conflict. And when that happens, there is no guarantee who is going to remain in the country, by the way. In Rwanda, similar things happened. When the ethnicity of every Rwandan had to be put onto their ID cards where they were called Tutsi, Hutu. And the Tutsis were only 15%. They endured marginalization. They endured victimization from the time we got independence from the Belgians until 1994, including pogroms, including trying to wipe them out from the face of the earth and calling them cockroaches. What eventually happened? They fought their way through. They kicked out the oppressors from the country, and that 15% has had the reins of this kind of Rwanda from 1994 until today. If you read the history of Uganda, a country like Uganda, and you see the kind of things that used to be done to the Banyankole, the Bahima, the Bachiga, those people of the West, the Batoro, because the conflict used to be between the northerners and the center, the Baganda, and what you call the northerners who are basically Nilotics. Whether it was the Kabaka side or it was Milton Obote, Brigadier General Okero, Tito, and all those ones. But eventually, when they could not endure, somebody from the north comes in, he gives them hell. Somebody from the other side comes in, he gives them hell. Basically, they were the punching bag for everybody. Now, in a sense, the minorities in this country cannot accept to become a punching bag for anybody, regardless of whether you consider yourself a majority or not. Mr. Speaker, can I beg you to just give me a few more minutes, like 5 minutes?
You'll have 2.
I have 3. No, thank you.
I said you'll have 2.
Mr. Speaker, and it's precisely in line with that. Let's read history. If you think you can enjoy life, you can have tarmac roads everywhere, you can have water everywhere, and the others are going to live like they are in, the Red Indians of the olden days, you know what I mean? And the Maasais are still going to be all their lives in shukas, and basically, they're there as a tourist attraction, nothing more. And you don't think that they're any more equal to you, then it doesn't work, Mr. Speaker. It creates that kind of a revolution. And the country will go to hell. So we are lucky we have not had a violent conflict or a civil war in this country. The day it happens, we've had it all around us. We've had it in Uganda, it's there in Sudan, it was there in South Sudan, it was there in Somalia, it's now happening in Ethiopia in a manner you cannot imagine. It's happened everywhere except Tanzania. The only neighbor that has not gone through that is Tanzania. Why? Tanzanians. You look at the history of that country. The first leader of Tanzania was a Zanaki. The people are no more than 100,000 population. The second leader, Mukapa, Nyerere was that, comes from a small minority in the south. The third leader, remind me the name, was also coming from a small, he comes from Bagamoyo, he's a Kikwete, Jakaya Kikwete. He's a Mkwere. The Kwere is about 30,000. Suluhu, as we have right now, you can imagine. Magufuli from small, you can only have a nation. The only guarantee for the future stability and existence of a country called Kenya is that kind of politics. Is that kind of politics. Not the politics in which you say, I'm going to use the impurity of my own, what they call numbers, you get tyranny of numbers to suppress everybody else. 1 minute, Sika, any chance?
You're going to need 30 or 1 hour?
1 minute.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. You can't have that. You can't have that. Because these are men. You know, a man, I am a man. Man is a mankind. I'm not talking, I'm a man, I'm a woman. That's what the African Americans were fighting for when they were going for emancipation way back in the South. They just said, I am a man. If you remember in Selma, Montgomery, and all that. Now, for you to think that any community is any less worth than you, and we all came from colonialism, we came from all that slavery and everything else, we should know better than that. We should know better than that, because a small minority whites colonized us for 70 years and subjugated us. You get my point? They were removed, both by our own efforts and the global efforts itself. Let's unite this country by having fairness, equity, equality, more than anything else, equity. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Jororok.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to support the Statute Law Miscellaneous Amendment Bill of 2023